tried to tell the parents that this was happening, and they didn't want to believe her. Stepbrother come in the room when she was sleeping and get on top of her.
The first thing you need to understand about this case is that it should have been ordinary, a routine weekend getaway for a bright, talented teen cheerleader on a Carnival cruise ship. Instead, it became the moment an entire nation stopped scrolling, stopped talking, and asked one terrifying question. How could a young woman with her entire future ahead of her end up dead on a ship filled with thousands of people? And even more haunting, how did nobody see what truly happened? Tonight, we're traveling into the heart of a tragedy that should have never unfolded, and yet somehow all the signs were there. Signs that went unnoticed, unchallenged, and unspoken. A story that forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality so many families are waking up to. Our children, especially our daughters, are walking into environments that pretend to be safe while quietly creating the exact conditions that allow danger to flourish. Stay with me, because the deeper you listen, the harder it becomes to look away. Her friends described her as the kind of girl who lit up every room, a disciplined athlete, a top-tier cheerleader, someone who balanced ambition with kindness. She boarded that ship expecting celebration, bonding, and a rare chance to breathe after months of intense training and academic pressure. Her parents thought they were giving her the gift of freedom. Instead, they would soon face the worst phone call any family can receive, a call that contradicts everything they believed about cruise ship safety. And that's where the first question starts. How does a vibrant young woman with no history of danger, no record of reckless behavior, and no intention of putting herself at risk simply vanish into the shadows of a ship constantly patrolled, constantly monitored, and constantly advertised as a floating paradise? Where were the eyes that should have been watching? Where were the safeguards? And why, in a world of digital surveillance, has the story become more confusing instead of clearer? According to early reports, she was last seen near one of the ship's main entertainment areas, an environment overflowing with alcohol, music, and people letting go of their inhibitions. A place where staff and guests blur together, where strangers feel familiar after just one drink, and where predators know they blend into a crowd that's distracted, overstimulated, and too relaxed to question anything. Is this where it all began? Is this where she crossed paths with someone who shouldn't have been anywhere near her? What witnesses recall, vaguely, inconsistently, and often secondhand, is a man who seemed unusually close to her that night. Some say they looked like friends. Others say she looked uncomfortable. Others claim the two shared a private moment. And the question that refuses to fade is the one nobody wants to answer. Were they forming a connection, or was he targeting her? Were they lovers, or was she being harassed? The difference changes everything, and yet nobody can agree on what they saw. This is where people become defensive, where stories shift, where memory becomes unreliable. And while these contradictions are expected after a traumatic event, they also reveal something bigger, something that should scare every parent listening right now. On a cruise ship, packed with thousands of people, it is incredibly easy to blend, to hide, to move unnoticed. Cameras don't cover every hallway. Staff cannot monitor every guest. And when alcohol flows without restraint, when people push themselves past their usual limits, the line between awareness and vulnerability becomes dangerously thin. As we continue to unravel her last hours, the atmosphere changes. Reports mention arguments overheard near the elevators. A witness claims she saw the cheerleader looking distressed. Another insists she was laughing moments later. Someone remembers her walking quickly, almost as if she was trying to get away from someone. But who? And why? And why is it that no single detail lines up cleanly with the next? Cruise ships promote indulgence. They encourage passengers to relax, to overeat, to drink more than they would at home. It's part of the appeal. Escape your responsibilities, your routines, your stress. But that same indulgence becomes the perfect camouflage for someone with darker intentions. And the more you look into cruise-related incidents, the more you realize how many cases share this exact environment. Loud music, dim lighting, open bars, loosened inhibitions, and an ocean that swallows evidence without hesitation. The FBI joined this investigation quickly, a rare sign of just how serious this case became. They don't step in unless there are unanswered questions, inconsistencies, or circumstances that demand federal oversight. And that alone forces us to ask, what did the initial investigators see that concerned them enough to escalate this case? Was it her injuries, her location, witness reports, the timeline, or was it the possibility that someone on board knew more than they were saying? We need to talk about the uncomfortable possibility that she might have trusted the wrong person. Young women, smart, capable, strong, are still groomed to be polite, to be agreeable, to avoid conflict. And predators know this. They look for the girl who doesn't want to make a scene, the girl who tells herself, it's probably nothing, the girl who second guesses her instincts. And this is why the guilt sits so heavy not on her, but on the adults who designed these environments, who marketed them as safe, and who allowed a culture of excessive consumption to overshadow basic protection. Investigators now face two equally disturbing paths. Either she willingly accompanied someone she barely knew, believing she could trust them, or she was followed by someone who intended to isolate her. Both scenarios raise a chilling question. How does a ship with cameras on every casino table, every retail shop, every buffet line, somehow fail to capture the most important moments of her final night? And if the footage exists, who has seen it? Who controls it? And why has none of it been released to the family? Parents are demanding answers. Advocates are demanding accountability, and viewers across the world are wondering how many similar incidents have been minimized, dismissed, or brushed aside. Because when you strip away the corporate branding, the smiling vacation photos, and the brochure-perfect scenery, what you have is a tightly confined floating city where a predator has the luxury of anonymity and an easy escape into international waters. This case isn't simply about one young woman. It's about the larger truth we don't want to acknowledge. Cruise ships are not built with safety first. They're built with profit first. More bars, more parties, more consumption, which means more chaos, more vulnerability, more opportunity for danger to slip through unnoticed. And while companies promote their security teams and their protocols, the reality is that families continue to receive phone calls like this one. Her parents believed their daughter was surrounded by fun, friends, and supervision. Instead, they were left with a tragedy that raises more questions than answers. What was the real relationship between her and the man she was last seen with? Was he interested in her romantically? Was he someone she trusted? Or was he someone who targeted her the moment she let her guard down? Every scenario feels wrong. Every scenario feels preventable. And yet here we are, questioning, speculating, and desperately searching for a truth that someone on board may be too afraid to share. As this investigation unfolds, we will continue examining every detail, every witness, every timeline gap, and every unanswered question. If you want to follow the next steps of this case, make sure you stay with us because new information is emerging and the story is far from over. And remember, tragedies like this don't happen in a vacuum. They happen because systems fail, people look away, and companies prioritize comfort over accountability. And until we confront that truth, more families will suffer the consequences we're watching unfold right now. Stay tuned. And yet, even that isn't the detail investigators are focusing on anymore. What matters now is what people noticed that night and what they chose to ignore. Because when you walk back through the accounts of passengers, a quiet pattern starts to emerge. Fragments of observations that shouldn't matter on their own, but together form something deeply unsettling. A couple dining on deck 5 claimed they saw her walking with someone who stayed a half step behind her, almost as if he was watching her reactions more than listening to her words. Another family says they passed her near the railings and felt a strange tension in the way she kept glancing over her shoulder. And yet no one stepped in. No one asked if she was okay. No one asked if she knew the man beside her or if she needed help. It makes you wonder, How many people saw something and convinced themselves it wasn't their place to get involved? How many passengers noticed the way she hugged her arms around herself as if trying to make her body smaller? How many caught a glimpse of that uncomfortable smile young women are forced to use when they're trying to escape a situation without escalating it? And why is it that on a ship overcrowded with people, noise, and activity, the one person who needed protection walked through a sea of bystanders who ultimately did nothing? Some witnesses insist she seemed perfectly fine. Others now admit there was something off, something in her expression that didn't match the energy of the room. But the most troubling accounts come from those who say they saw her earlier that day with someone who appeared unusually attached to her, someone who stood too close, spoke too softly, or lingered even after she walked away. Were they simply friends? Did she know him from home? Or was this someone who inserted himself into her orbit once the trip began, taking advantage of her openness and her tendency to give people the benefit of the doubt? Passengers reported seeing him at the karaoke lounge, the pool deck, the buffet, always nearby, always within view. And the question that continues to haunt this investigation is painfully simple. Were they building a connection, or was she trying to get away from him? People remember fragments, a hand on her arm, a quick shake of her head, a brief argument near the stairwell, but memory becomes foggy when alcohol, loud music, and the illusion of safety interfere. Yet investigators can't ignore that multiple people noticed the two together. Multiple people felt something was strange, and multiple people are now forced to confront the reality that they were in the vicinity of a tragedy they didn't recognize in time to prevent. What's even more concerning is the timeline gap, a window of time so poorly accounted for that authorities still can't determine the exact moment everything changed. Passengers walked past her, staff served her, cameras captured her moving from one area to another, but there's a portion of the night where she simply slips out of view, as if the ship itself swallowed her presence, and that absence has become the breaking point of this investigation. Who was with her? Who last spoke to her? Who saw her expression, her posture, her demeanor shift in a way that suggested she wasn't safe? As investigators question passengers, they keep encountering the same quiet hesitation. People worrying about misremembering, about being wrong, about involving themselves in something they don't fully understand. Yet those same hesitations are what allow moments like this to escalate unchecked. Because predators rely on silence. They rely on hesitation. They rely on the uncomfortable truth that most people look away when something feels off, convincing themselves it's none of their business. And on a cruise ship, a place that thrives on distraction and indulgence, that silence becomes a shield for anyone looking to slip through the cracks. The ship's bars poured drinks without pause, the hallways filled with laughter, with strangers brushing past each other, with people carrying too much confidence and too little caution. In that environment, her discomfort should have stood out like a warning flare. Instead, it blended into the noise, unnoticed or unacknowledged by the very people who later admitted they sensed something wasn't right. And that raises a painful question we as a society avoid far too easily. How many tragedies unfold simply because the right person didn't speak up at the right moment? As the FBI continues to gather testimonies, more witnesses are coming forward, some reluctantly, some nervously, some clearly burdened with guilt. They describe seeing her near the elevators, standing close to someone she didn't appear comfortable with. They describe her hesitating before stepping into a hallway. They describe the kind of subtle distress young women recognize instantly, but others dismiss as nothing important. And each new account widens the emotional gap between what should have happened that night and what actually did. If you're following this investigation, make sure you stay with us. The next phase of the story is about to reveal details that could completely shift the direction of the case. And if you want updates as they come in, remember to subscribe so you don't miss what investigators uncover next. Because the questions are only getting harder, the discrepancies are getting wider, and the truth, whatever it turns out to be, is beginning to point to a failure that didn't start with her final moments, but with the dozens of opportunities people had to protect her long before that. And the most heartbreaking part? We still don't know whose hands she trusted or whose presence she feared.